My name is Paige Monroe. I live in Columbus, Ohio. 7 months after my divorce, my brother Garrett lost his job. And suddenly, everyone started calling me again. Mom, Dad, Garrett. They all needed something. And that's when I remembered the sealed envelope my ex-mother-in-law, Karen Mercer, had given me the day I moved out. She hugged me and whispered, "Sweetheart, don't open this until they need something from you." So I waited, until they finally did. And when I opened that envelope, I realized the only person who saw my family coming was the woman everyone expected me to hate. After my divorce, people stopped asking how I was doing. Instead, they asked what happened. My mother, Linda Monroe, acted embarrassed. Dad changed the subject whenever anyone mentioned Evan. And my brother Garrett? He loved making jokes. Guess married life wasn't your thing. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because crying would have made them uncomfortable. That was my first mistake. Nobody knew why my marriage ended. Not Mom, not Dad, not Garrett. I protected Evan. And honestly, I protected myself. Because admitting my husband hid debt and lied for years felt humiliating, so when Mom said, "Divorce changes people," I just nodded. I let everyone think I failed, because sometimes silence hurts less than explaining. The day I moved out, Karen Mercer walked me to my car. My ex-mother-in-law. The woman everyone expected me to hate. She hugged me and cried. Then she pressed a sealed envelope into my hand. "Not now, sweetheart." I frowned. "What is this?" She shook her head. "Later." Then she whispered, "When they need something from you." And suddenly, she looked disappointed. Not in me, in something else. Meanwhile, Garrett became the family success story. Mom bragged about him constantly. Dad called him ambitious. Relatives loved him. And every family gathering became a celebration of Garrett, while I became the cautionary tale, the divorced daughter, the awkward conversation. I wish that had been the worst part. I stopped explaining myself, stopped attending every dinner, stopped answering every group chat, and quietly rebuilt my life. Consulting work, a small apartment, long nights, no drama, and I saved every text message. Not because I planned revenge, because pain has a memory. Whenever Garrett visited, he made comments. "Still single? Need me to set you up?" Mom laughed. Dad smiled awkwardly. Then Garrett said something I'll never forget. "At least my in-laws still answer my calls." Everyone laughed. Except me. Because I noticed Mom didn't defend me. She smiled. That changed something inside me. At Thanksgiving, Aunt Cheryl asked how Evan's family was doing. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, they probably forgot Paige exists." Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile. But I knew something they didn't. Karen still mailed me Christmas cards. Karen still checked on me. And strangely, Karen treated me better after the divorce than my own family did. Only my cousin Emily stayed neutral. One night she called. "You okay?" I almost cried, because nobody had asked me that in months. Not Mom, not Dad, not Garrett. Emily sighed. "They don't realize they're hurting you." I smiled sadly. "No, they realize. They just think I'll forgive it." 7 months later, I was making coffee when Mom called. Her voice sounded strange, almost sweet. "Sweetheart, how are you?" I froze. Mom hadn't called me sweetheart in months. Then she said, "Garrett lost his job." And suddenly, I understood why she was being nice. That same day, Dad called. Then Garrett. Then Aunt Cheryl. Everyone suddenly cared. Everyone suddenly missed me. And sitting at my desk, I looked at the bottom drawer, because inside it, still sealed, still untouched, was Karen's envelope. And for the first time in 7 months, I wondered why she knew this day would come. Garrett didn't sound confident anymore. Actually, he sounded scared. Paige, I just need to get back on my feet. I almost didn't recognize his voice. This was the same brother who joked about my divorce, the same brother Mom called her success story, and now suddenly, he needed help. I didn't know it yet. But I wasn't the first person he'd called. Mom called again that night. Karen still knows people, doesn't she? I froze. Excuse me? Evan's mother. She's connected. Dad chimed in. Family helps family. Family. Interesting word. Because 7 months ago, nobody acted like I was family. But suddenly, my ex-mother-in-law mattered. That was my second warning. Garrett called me himself. Do you still talk to Karen? Sometimes. Maybe she could introduce me to someone. I stayed quiet. Then he laughed awkwardly. Just one conversation. One conversation, as if they hadn't spent months treating my marriage like a joke. And suddenly, I wondered. Why Karen specifically? That night, Karen texted me. Just one sentence. I hope you're doing okay. Call me if things get complicated. I stared at the message. She knew. Somehow she knew. And she wasn't surprised. That scared me more than anything. Dad called the next day. How's work? I almost laughed. He hadn't asked that in months. Then he casually said, You know, Karen always liked you. There it was. Not concern, not love, access. And suddenly I realized everyone was following the same script. Mom sounded offended. Karen owes this family. I nearly dropped the phone. Owes us? After everything we did. Everything? What exactly had they done? Because from where I stood, Karen owed nobody anything. And somehow, Mom believed otherwise. That changed everything. Then my cousin Emily called late at night. She sounded nervous. Paige, I don't want to be involved. My stomach tightened. Involved in what? Emily sighed. They've already contacted Karen. I froze. What? Your mom, Garrett, even your dad. I sat up straight, because nobody had mentioned that, not once. Emily forwarded screenshots. Family WhatsApp. Mom, don't tell Paige we've already talked to Karen. Garrett, she owes us after everything. Dad, just make sure Paige doesn't overreact. My hands started shaking. Nobody missed me. Nobody wanted me. They wanted a connection, and they were using me to reach it. Mom invited me to dinner. Just family. Dad promised no pressure. Garrett said he wanted to apologize. I almost believed him. Almost. Then Emily texted me again. Paige, Dad already planned a speakerphone call with Karen. I stared at my screen. Because they weren't planning a reunion. They were planning an ambush. That night, I stood in front of my desk and opened the bottom drawer. The envelope was still there. 7 months. Untouched. Exactly as Karen left it. My fingers touched the paper, but I stopped. Because Karen said, not until they need something from you. And now, they clearly did. But I still had no idea what Karen had known all along. At 11:30 that night, I sat alone in my apartment and finally opened Karen's envelope. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted answers. Inside were screenshots, printed emails, a handwritten note, and an apology. My heart sank, because Karen hadn't written, I told you so. She wrote, Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I think your family sees people the same way Evan did, as opportunities. I stopped breathing. This wasn't about my divorce anymore. The first screenshot was from LinkedIn. Garrett had messaged one of Karen's executives. My sister was married into the Mercer family. Mrs. Mercer knows me well. Would love to connect. There were dozens. Different executives, different companies, different requests. He'd been doing it for months. without telling me, and using my marriage to do it. That changed everything. Then I saw emails. Karen had highlighted them herself. Garrett wrote, "Mrs. Mercer practically considers me family." Another said, "My sister's divorce hasn't changed our relationship." I sat back, because Garrett wasn't desperate. He'd been networking off my pain, and apparently Karen noticed long before I did. The handwritten note shook me. "I warned Garrett months ago. I told him to stop using your name." He laughed and said family connections were meant to be used. Then she wrote, "Sweetheart, I know your parents. They'll only call when they need something." I understood why she told me to wait. There were screenshots from Mom, messages to Karen. Garrett just needs one opportunity. Paige won't mind. We're still family. Family. Because Mom hadn't called me family in months. But suddenly, my divorce didn't matter anymore. Not when they needed access. Before I could process everything, my phone rang. Karen. I answered immediately. Her voice sounded tired. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not telling you sooner." Then she sighed. Garrett wasn't desperate. He was ambitious. And ambition without character destroys people. That sentence stayed with me. Karen explained everything. Garrett wasn't fired because of layoffs. Executives started talking. People noticed inconsistencies. References didn't match. Stories changed, and several Mercer executives complained privately. Not because Karen asked them to, because Garrett made himself impossible to trust. His own lies ruined him. Not me. Not Karen. Him. Before hanging up, Karen sent me a voicemail. "Sweetheart, don't let them rewrite this. He wasn't desperate. He was networking off your pain. I warned him. He ignored me. And I blocked all of them months ago." Blocked. Mom, Dad, Garrett. All of them. And they never told me, because they still thought I could fix it. The next morning, Dad called. "Dinner tonight. No pressure. Garrett just wants advice." Advice? Emily immediately texted me. "Speakerphone is ready." I smiled sadly, because they really thought I didn't know, and suddenly, I wasn't nervous anymore. I put Karen's envelope into my purse, then added Emily's screenshots, Karen's emails, Garrett's LinkedIn messages, and the voicemail. Because for the first time in 7 months, I wasn't walking into dinner hoping they'd love me. I was walking in knowing exactly why they'd called. And I wasn't sure they were ready for what Karen had already shown me. When I walked into Mom and Dad's house, everyone was waiting. Mom, Dad, Garrett, even Aunt Cheryl. Nobody smiled. Nobody hugged me. And sitting in the middle of the table was Dad's phone, speaker mode already open. Apparently, they expected me to call Karen. I almost laughed, because they still thought I didn't know. Mom reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, Garrett's been through enough." Dad nodded. "People deserve second chances." Garrett lowered his head. "We all make mistakes." Mistakes. Interesting word, because nobody called my divorce a mistake. They called it failure. But Garrett? Garrett deserved compassion. That changed everything. Then Mom finally said it. "Karen listens to you. There are executives she knows. Garrett just needs one opportunity." One opportunity. Not an apology. Not reconciliation. Just access. And suddenly, I understood something. Nobody had invited me to dinner. They invited my connections. Garrett looked miserable. "I know I messed up. But you know people. I do the same for you." I almost smiled. Because no, he wouldn't. He laughed when my marriage ended. He mocked me. And he used my divorce to build his reputation. But apparently, he forgot I knew that now. Dad picked up his phone. "Let's just call Karen." I calmly said, "She blocked you." Everyone froze. Mom blinked. "What?" "Months ago, Garrett sat upright. Dad slowly lowered the phone, and for the first time that night, nobody had a speech. "That's ridiculous," Mom whispered. "We've always loved Karen." I opened my purse, pulled out the envelope, and placed it on the table. Then Karen's printed emails. Mom stopped crying. Dad's face changed. Garrett stopped breathing. Their secret wasn't secret anymore. Next came Emily's screenshots. Mom's message: "Don't tell Paige we've already talked to Karen." Garrett: "She owes us after everything." Dad: "Just make sure Paige doesn't overreact." Nobody spoke. Not one word. Because they weren't caught lying. They were caught planning. And there was a difference. Then I played the voicemail. Karen's voice filled the room. "Sweetheart, don't let them rewrite this." He wasn't desperate. He was networking off your pain. I warned him. And I blocked all of them. Mom started crying again. Dad closed his eyes. Garrett stared at the table. Because the woman they thought I should hate had protected me. Then I looked at Mom. If Karen owes this family so much, why did she block all of you? Nobody answered. I looked at Dad. Nothing. Then Garrett. Silence. Because there wasn't an answer. Only shame. Nobody was asking me to make the call anymore. I stood up slowly. You remembered me when your shortcuts ran out. Nobody cared how I was after the divorce. You cared when Garrett needed help. Mom started sobbing. Dad whispered, "That's not fair." I smiled sadly. No. What's unfair is thinking I wouldn't figure it out. Then I picked up Karen's envelope and walked toward the door. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving rejected. I was leaving informed. And they finally understood. I wasn't coming back to fix this. 3 days later, Garrett called. 22 times. I never answered. Then Aunt Cheryl called. Apparently, Garrett had another interview. Another executive position. And somehow, the hiring manager already knew his reputation because Mercer executives talked. Not because Karen destroyed him, because Garrett had done that himself. And suddenly, my brother realized connections couldn't save character. Mom showed up at my apartment, crying, holding flowers. "Sweetheart, families make mistakes." I stood quietly. Then she whispered, "We should move on." Move on. Interesting. Nobody told me to move on when my marriage ended. Nobody moved on when I was the embarrassment. But now that Garrett suffered, everybody wanted peace. I didn't know it yet. But peace and access were two different things. Dad came a week later. No speeches, no excuses. Just honesty. "I knew your mother contacted Karen." I closed my eyes. "I know." "I knew Garrett sent messages." "I know." Then Dad started crying. "I thought you would fix it." And that hurt more than anything. Because after 40 years, my father still believed my purpose was cleaning up everybody else's mess. That changed something inside me. 2 months later, I opened my mailbox. Inside was a card, Karen's handwriting. I smiled immediately. Inside she wrote, "Divorce ended a marriage, sweetheart. It didn't end family." And tucked behind the card was a photograph. Me, Karen, and Evan's grandmother. Christmas, 3 years earlier. I cried, because somehow, the woman I supposedly lost still chose me. Emily called me one night. "Paige, I feel guilty." "For what?" "Everyone knew." "What?" She sighed. "The family knew they were using you." My stomach dropped. "Even Aunt Cheryl?" Emily whispered. "Everyone." Apparently, they all expected me to call Karen, expected me to forgive, expected me to save Garrett. Because apparently, I always had. If you've ever realized people missed your usefulness more than they missed you, comment. I deserved better. Then Garrett left a voicemail. Actually, 6 of them, but the last one stayed with me. Paige, I'm your brother. I made mistakes. You know people. I need help. Not, I miss you. Not, I'm sorry. Not, how are you? Just, I need. And suddenly, I realized Karen had been right all along. Thanksgiving came around again. Mom invited me. Dad begged. Aunt Cheryl promised things were different. I politely declined. Because I wasn't angry. I was tired. And tired people don't need revenge. They need peace. That was something I'd finally learned. Emily kept me updated. Garrett blamed Karen. Blamed executives. Blamed bad luck. Blamed the economy. Everybody except himself. And hearing that, I stopped feeling angry. Because people who never take responsibility repeat the same mistakes. And that wasn't my burden anymore. Christmas Eve. Mom sent one text. Family should move on. I stared at it, then deleted it. Because moving on didn't mean pretending. Moving on meant accepting. Accepting who people were. Accepting what they chose. And accepting that love without respect isn't love at all. I never replied. Funny thing about divorce. People expected me to hate Karen. But she protected me. People expected my family to protect me. But they needed me. And that's the difference. Need isn't love. Access isn't love. And guilt isn't love either. The day my marriage ended, I thought I had lost a family. I was wrong. I just lost access to people who only valued me when I could solve their problems. And the only person who saw it before I did was the woman everyone expected me to hate.